Hi, welcome back to my channel, Healing Hope. My name is Shay, and I am 28 years old, and I am fighting a chronic illness. And so this is my story of just my journey with Lyme disease up until now. And so I am splitting it up into two parts because otherwise it'd be really long. And I personally don't like having to watch like super long videos. Like if it's over 20 minutes, it's just hard for me. So I prefer if they're 20 or under. So that's my goal. So I'm going to split it up. And so for today, I want to talk about just the years leading up to the actual diagnosis of Lyme disease, late stage. Yeah, because it took quite a few years. So that's just kind of what I just want to share with you guys all tonight. So thanks for watching my video, and sorry for the bad lighting, but it's all I got for now. So my story. So I've been sick. I think I got Lyme disease about 9 years ago. I don't think I really noticed symptoms until like a year and a half later that I really recognized as symptoms now. So during my college years, each summer, after freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior year, I worked at a camp in Maryland, which was awesome. And my camp director had even talked about Lyme disease and to be aware of ticks and always wear tick spray and do tick checks. And, I did do it some, but, teenage Shay, just, you think you're invincible. And I also thought I knew what Lyme disease, did, which I just had a naive perspective of it. So, yeah, so probably didn't do as well as I should have. And so towards the end of the summer in 2008, I became down with flu-like symptoms. And so actually ended up going to the ER due to just various things. And I was really out of it and just really sick. And so they did test me for different things. They tested me actually for meningitis too, even though I'd had the vaccination because I lived in dorms. But I remember that happening. And everything came out negative. And what they should have done was give me antibiotics just based off of flu-like symptoms, which that is signs of a tick like Lyme disease. And it's the summer, so flus aren't really normal in the summer. And I worked in Maryland at a summer camp in the woods. So by CDC rules, I should have been on antibiotics. So that's frustrating looking back that they didn't do that. But you can't change things, so you just gotta live with it, right? So I then went back to school and just kind of continued with life. Didn't really think much of anything at that point. I didn't really notice any symptoms after that, so I just enjoyed sophomore year of college. It wasn't until my junior year, so fast forward to 2009, I was hit by a car as a pedestrian. I was going to school in Chicago, and nothing no major accident. I mean, I was hit, kind of rolled onto the ground from the car, had to push off the car into the icy gutter. It was a hit and run, and the doctors just said I needed to keep my core strong, and I just might have to deal with more soreness in my lower back. It might just be weaker. So that was that, and I did some physical therapy for it, but that was pretty much it. So, but after that, looking back now, I can kind of see the progression of, your immune system might be fighting something, and then some type of trauma can happen, whether it's a physical or emotional or different things. And so so after being hit by the car, I just noticed this overwhelming fatigue, just more than I had ever experienced. And I was getting even if I got 9 hours sleep, I'd wake up just exhausted, and would still take a 2-hour nap later that day. So I went and saw different doctors when I was home at break, and even in Chicago, I went to a few doctors. They could test me for mono and various things, and everything came back negative. We actually tested for Lyme disease. Everything came back negative, and that was kind of it. So junior and senior year, the fatigue was probably the worst part, and it definitely affected just my lifestyle. and college years. And it even like affected some friendships. Like people would ask why I wasn't hanging out as much and why I wasn't up for late night adventures or various things, and I just wasn't up for it. And I didn't really know how to explain that to people. I mean, you say you're tired in college, and everybody's like, we all are, you know? But it was definitely a different level of tiredness. And so I'm looking at notes, otherwise I get things confused. So symptoms just kept coming slowly. Well, summer of 2011, after I graduated, I was back at the camp, and I was actually on the med staff, so I was a medical assistant working with the nurses, which was really cool. And I remember taking off, like a lot of kids had ticks. I mean, it wasn't uncommon to have a kid come in and need a tick taken off. And I honestly just still didn't think much of it, and it wasn't even in our protocol. Like, we would document it, and like the parents would know. But otherwise, I mean, we just took the tick off and sent them on their way. Yeah, but that summer was also really hard. The fatigue was just getting worse, which I didn't think it could, but it did. And so I just kind of attributed it to just the busy schedule of camp. And even just the past few years, that's kind of, I just was like, well, maybe it is just, you know, my lifestyle, and I'm just not up for as much, and didn't think too hard on it. That summer was just hard due to the schedule, and then I had a heartbreak, which that's really hard emotionally and really wears on you. So I just kind of kept persevering. And then the fall of 2011, I actually moved back home. I was actually going to go back to school, and I wanted to go into nursing. So I had some prerequisites still to have to do. And so that was what I was going to do that year. And so but symptoms just kept coming that I didn't really recognize this next one as a symptom. I really struggled with school and struggled with like grasping it and focusing, which really like was frustrating to me because I really like school and I really like science and I like math and I just love all that. So I was really excited to be back into that because what I had gone to school for, I went to Moody Bible Institute as a counseling major. So very different, and I was really excited to be back with sciences. And I just struggled a lot more. It took a lot more study time than I used to, and my grades weren't as good. I mean, they weren't terrible, but it was just different. I could tell my brain was functioning different. At least something was different. But I just kind of attributed it. I haven't done science or math in a while, but now I can kind of see like what that was. So, and different symptoms started happening. I started getting my joints just started hurting more, and so I had started working out, and I had never been a super athletic person. I've just never been super into shape, but I haven't been like super overweight either, just kind of fluctuating, like just staying steady in that middle range there. So, just the fatigue just kept getting worse, and insomnia started hitting me more, which I had struggled with off and on growing up, but nothing like this was becoming more of like a routine thing. So that was just really hard. And then I actually started dating the guy one of my best friends in college. He lived 3,100 miles away at that point, so poor timing on our part. But we started dating, and I actually went out to visit him in Colorado when he was visiting his family close to Christmas time that year. And just traveling just wore me out more than it used to. But I just kind of brushed it off again. I mean, I just kind of was living life and trying to deal the best that I could. But traveling just wore me out. And so fast forward then again to March of 2012, I visited him out in Washington where he was living and working, and was super excited to be with my boyfriend, and we were living long distance. And so we held hands a lot. And what I noticed was it really hurt to hold hands, like whether we were just holding like this, but interlocking, we did that a lot, and it just hurt a lot. And like when he would his thumb would lightly rub me, it would just be painful. So just any light touches on my skin just hurt. Hugs hurt if they were too strong, which I'd kind of noticed a little bit. I mean, I'm not the biggest huggy person, but my mom likes to hug, so I had kind of noticed it, but didn't think much of it until that week when I spent with him and just noticing that pain. Yeah, so it's just more and more things happening and things getting worse and more frequent. And I had a lot of GI issues, and I won't get into too much detail of that. But it just, yeah, so my eating habits had to change. I really, not drastically, but I just noticed things that were making me not feel good, so I would stop eating them. Yeah, and so during that year, I was also volunteering at a youth group, which I really enjoyed that. But I wasn't super busy. I mean, I didn't have a lot of friends in the area, so I was just doing school and working. I had some different side jobs. I was a waitress, which was really hard. I was waitressing from like February 2012. Yeah, 2012. So I did that for a few months, and it was really hard on my joints, the bending down and like just on my feet a lot. And I just noticed it really wearing on me, and I just felt older than I was. I mean, I was only 22, I think, at that point. And so we had still like kind of gone to doctors, but everybody was saying I was fine, no big deal, just get some rest basically. And so also that semester I found out something went wrong with my classes or my transcripts or something, and I wasn't going to be able to get into nursing school that fall. So I then decided to move closer to Andrew. We got engaged in May of 2012, and so I moved out end of June or beginning of July of 2012, and I lived with his boss and his wife. They opened up their basement, and so I was living like 20 minutes away from Andrew, but not too far. The trip out there with my dad was just, it was rough. I mean, my body hurt everywhere, and not just soreness of like riding in the car, because everybody gets, antsy, and it's hard being cramped in there for long hours, but it was just painful. My lower back hurt a lot, and just my joints. And we stopped for 2 nights to hike in the Grand Tetons, my dad and I. My dad loves hiking, and he has passed that on to me and my sisters, and so it was really important to me to go hiking with him. But I remember it being pretty painful, especially on the more incline parts. My knee joints and my ankles, it really hurt. So we did a decent little hike, and then we came down and we were getting back to the level part where we had to go around the lake, and I looked at my dad and I was just like, I just can't do the rest of it. And so there was like a ferry or a boat going across the lake back to where like we parked, and so we took that back, but that was really hard for me, like us having to do that for me, and so it really kind of depressed me a lot, just noticing that difference, and yeah, just really discouraging, and not knowing why I was feeling this way. And so we get to Washington, and it took me a while to kind of recoup from that. But I helped out with my husband with where he worked, or he was my fiance at the time, working with some youth, and I loved doing that, and I was more involved in the beginning. And then we got married in October. We got married in Florida, so a lot of traveling, which that exhausted me. And then just the weekend of my wedding, it was just a lot, and I was not feeling well. But there was really exciting because there was all, family in town, and my close girlfriends from college and from camp, and my friend from the Netherlands even flew in. And it was all really exciting, and I was just really frustrated because I just couldn't enjoy it like, you always hope to. And so that was really hard, and I didn't sleep the night before my wedding, which just made all my symptoms even worse. And so my wedding day, I know it was really special, and I remember bits and pieces, and I know it was beautiful, but I honestly don't remember much. I was in a lot of pain. And then we flew back to Washington the next day, and it took me a while to recoup then. And I still hadn't found a job, and by then it was all rainy, and my fatigue was just getting worse, and my insomnia, and just all my symptoms were just getting worse. And it was weird how they would like rotate. It was the oddest thing. So, but I also just started having more and more symptoms, and I would like feel like skin sensations, like crawling things, and I like inside my body, like I don't even know how to describe it, but it was like I could feel things moving it's really crazy, and I thought I was going crazy. That's what I felt like. So yeah, and that year I was also, my hormones were getting even worse. I was, oh my goodness, emotional to the max, and I was depressed, and then not as depressed, and then I was anxious, like socially, like it was just really, like my anxiety was so heightened when I would get like be around other people, which was a lot since we were trying to make friends, and it was just hard. I had lots of crying and sobbing, like hardcore sobbing, my poor husband. And I wasn't a super big crier before. I mean, I was the type that would bottle things up, but then all of a sudden I'll have like a good cry and just be emotional, but it wasn't like as frequent as it was. And just like uncontrollable anger and just sobbing, and I was really clingy and dependent on my husband, and I was a very independent like person before, like a very independent spirit. I'm not always needing to be near a significant other or the buddy, but I just very independent, fine doing my own thing, but definitely was not anymore. And so, but then I went through like a 2-month period of like where I was sleeping all the time, which later I found out that that was probably when I did actually have mono, did finally get it. But I didn't find out until later after the fact. It showed that I did have Epstein-Barr, so, but it was latent at that point. Yeah, so while we were in Washington, I did go see different doctors, various doctors, and I was on different things for helping me sleep, which would sometimes help me, and I would get some sleep. But it just, doctors just, they said I had fibromyalgia. They put me on antidepressants, but antidepressants just made everything so much worse. Or they just said I was fine, and basically I was fine. And they would have this look on their face like I was just crazy. Thankfully, I never actually heard someone say it, which I know some people have experienced that, which would have been really hard. But I knew there was something wrong. I just didn't even know what to do at that point. And so in February of 2013, I actually ended up going to the Mayo Clinic in Arizona. My parents really wanted me to go, and my husband. And so my parents and my husband, we all flew to Arizona. And I was there for 2 weeks, and I saw every single specialty doctor there is. I went through countless tests and labs, and you name it, I had it. 2 very long weeks and very exhausting. And all that came up from it was I had less hearing in my left ear, and I did have some lymph nodes enlarged, and I didn't know why. And so they said I should go and get a biopsy of it when I got back home, which that's always nerve-wracking, lymph nodes, because you think lymphoma, since they didn't see another active infection going on. And the mono that they saw that I had, EBV, and they just said it was most likely just fibromyalgia and gave me pamphlets of how to live with it, basically. So I went back and I got a biopsy. I got a lymph node taken out back here, and they biopsied it, and waiting for that was kind of nerve-wracking. But it came back negative, which was a big praise, but it also just left us still in the dark, and just frustrated and just not knowing what to do. Yeah. And then a couple months later, we did end up moving to Colorado for an opportunity for my husband. And so we moved there. Traveling again was really hard, took a while to recoup, and I was just having a really hard time emotionally. I flew down for my nephew's birth, September of that year, and I just had a breakdown with my parents at that point of just being so frustrated and just feeling like I had lost so much of myself. I was so far from the person that I used to be, and there was no answers, and I just didn't know how to continue persevering in that. And it was just really overwhelming. And I had also, like in Washington, I couldn't find a job for like 10 months. And so moving to a new state, and it was just nerve-wracking of, will I find a job? And for my sanity, I needed a job. And so I got back, and I was actually offered a job I had interviewed for like a month previous. And so it was really exciting. So I was going to start in October. But we had also arranged for a doctor's appointment with a Lyme doctor for the beginning of October, which is also when I started work. Because my mom actually over Mayo Clinic had been reading a book about a woman with Lyme disease and just that whole process, and her symptoms were so similar to mine and just her journey. And so my mom was really encouraging us with that. And so my trip in September kind of got us going to see one in October. And so the day after I started my new job, I went to that, and the doctor was pretty confident that it was Lyme disease and possible co-infections, but he wanted to do some labs for it. And then he also did some other weird testing. He's very alternative, and so I was just really weirded out by it. I wasn't really comfortable with those things at the time. Not alternative minded much at all. And I left with a lot of supplements and herbs, and I was just super overwhelmed with it. And so we got back home, and I just looked at my husband, and I was like, I can't do this. I was kind of surviving and just living with my symptoms, and the doctor weirded me out, and I was just overwhelmed. And so we actually returned everything and then just tried to live life as normal as possible, I persevered for a few months, and then January hit, and things just started going down a lot faster. Just symptoms just kept getting worse. I was getting dizzy more. The pain was intensifying. My husband actually have to like carry me at times, and would have to like get me out of bed himself and hold on. I'd have to hold on to him as I like first walked in the morning, because it just hurt a lot. And so things were just getting worse and worse. And so at that point, we wanted to revisit the whole Lyme thing. There was another Lyme doctor that we heard about, and so we contacted him, and he wanted us to run labs first. And so he sent us a kit, and we went and did that at a local lab, and got some crazy looks because I was just asking them to draw blood, and then I was going to be sending it off, which was just the beginning of getting weird looks from doctors' offices or labs for what I was doing. So we sent it off to a lab in California, and we waited, and then it came back, and it showed that I had Lyme disease. And so I remember getting that call and just being like, oh, an answer. I was so excited of just having an answer. And and with my limited knowledge, I was like, oh, so this isn't going to be much of a big deal. I had an idea from the other doctor we had seen back in October that it would be kind of a process, but I didn't fully understand it, even though I had heard. I still had no idea what I was getting into. And so the first hit was the doctor that we had gotten the labs done through, he then informed us that he had a year wait list, which came out of nowhere. He hadn't informed us of that sooner. And so that just kind of rocked us, and we didn't know of any other doctors that we had found in Colorado that specialized in Lyme, in late stage Lyme. And we didn't realize how big of a controversy it was either. So just finding that out in our research was just overwhelming, because there's a huge controversy. You should look it up. So we did end up finding a doctor in Florida. And so we went and saw him in April, and then we made the decision to move to Florida. It all happened very quickly. We both moved. I moved ahead of my husband by a week or two. And so in total, it was like 6 weeks from when we got diagnosed to when we ended up back in Florida. And so it was really fast. And it was really hard explaining that to people, of just making that drastic move. And a lot of people, when you hear Lyme disease, they don't think of, my previous knowledge of what I thought, not thinking it was as big of a deal. But when it's not caught, it's a huge deal. And it can really mess up a person. And the thing is, it can be more than just Lyme disease. Ticks carry other things, like Bartonella and Babesia and Mycoplasma, and there are more. So most people get more than just Lyme disease, so that complicates it. And yeah, so that was 3.5 years ago, that diagnosis. So it took us a good 4.5 years of actively searching. I mean, the last year before it, we had been looking more. But it was quite a journey and just very discouraging and not feeling understood and not listened to, and just felt like the symptoms were just being treated and not finding a cause. And so we just weren't happy with the fibromyalgia diagnosis. I just felt like there was more, like something was causing those symptoms of fibromyalgia, which I totally believe in those symptoms, and I believe fibromyalgia is a byproduct of something else. That's my personal viewpoint. So don't think I'm saying that it's not like a real thing, because I definitely believe it is. And yeah, it is. Like I have that, but I think it's an outcome of something else. At least that's from my own research and my experience. But yeah, so if you're one that's really sick and you've been trying to look for things, or if your health is just starting to get progressively worse and doctors are saying you're fine and you're not finding answers, I just encourage you to not give up. I'm wearing a Lyme shirt right now that I have from Lyme Warrior, and it says never give up, and that's just huge for me now, of where I'm at in this journey, and also just where I was back then of not having answers, and just hearing I needed to go see, a therapist, which I totally believe in counseling. I was a counseling major, but I think that be helpful along the journey, but I don't think that was like the cure of anything. Yeah, so I know how it feels to have people think you're crazy and you're making things up. So I just encourage you to not give up and to keep looking for answers. If you feel like there's something more, just keep finding someone to who will finally listen and will help find things to help you. Yeah, so I've come a long way from where I am, from where I was then. It's been quite a journey, which I'll share more on that. But yeah, so advocate for yourself. I would like to say that you can trust doctors, but sadly our medical system, there's a lot of politicalness that goes on, insurance companies, and a lot of it is revolved around money. It's just crazy. And so I don't think the doctors themselves are bad, but I think they're under a lot of different restrictions and stuff themselves, and they have to process through patients a lot too. So you really have to advocate for yourself, and don't just take the word of one doctor, and be open to also just more alternative things. There's pros and cons of both, and I think when you can intermix both of what mainstream medicine and then alternative, I think that's huge, and I don't think you should disregard one or the other, but be open to more things, because some of the alternative has honestly helped me way more and has brought me greater health, which I will share more about that later. But yeah, so that is my journey of finally getting a diagnosis with late-stage Lyme disease, or chronic Lyme disease, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, so tune in to my next one. Sorry this was a little bit longer than I was hoping, but and I even tried to shorten it a lot, and I know I missed some things, but those were, I guess, the key points, and just the whole thing of I know what it's like to just search and search and keep getting the door shut, and you get worse. And so yeah, but if you have any questions or comments, comment on my video, and look for my next one coming out soon. I hope you guys have a good rest of the day.